Mic check 1, 2, 3. Okay, I guess we're live. Checking the voice again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Mic check 1, 2, 3. Okay. Walaikum assalam, Cinnamon. Where were you yesterday? I was just looking for you. Shelly, Walaikum assalam. Okay, we have started this book of Arundhati Roy, Gujarat Files. Walaikum assalam, Sayyid Hamim. Okay, we have started it. And we have finished almost 15% of the book, and we shall continue today. वालेकुम अस्सलाम आइनैन, हाउ आर यू? तो पहले मैं लिंक ज़रा ट्विटर पे पेस्ट कर देता हूँ। आना तो किसी को आया नहीं वहाँ से, फिर भी लेट्स शेयर इट। फिर ये लोग ये ना कहे कि हमने कहा नहीं। यार tweeting the link of this stream. Hello Sony Farouk, how are you? वेटिंग इट एज गुजरात फाइल्स, उसके बाद मैं डिलीट कर दूंगा जो ही हम स्ट्रीम खत्म करेंगे। आई डोंट वांट इट टू बी देयर। तो ये हो गया, जिसको आना था वो ऑलमोस्ट आ गया। सो और 2-3 मिनट हम वेट करेंगे तब तक, क्योंकि मैंने अब ट्वीट कर दिए। लेट्स वेट फॉर देम, देन वी विल स्टार्ट अगेन फ्रॉम वेयर वी लेफ्ट yesterday. So we actually, this device which was gifted by a dear friend of mine, it actually shows how much time is left according to the speed of the reader. It shows the time left and also the percentage you have completed of the book. So इसमें अभी दिखा रहा है कि 4 घंटे और 44 मिनट अभी भी इस बुक में लगेंगे, and we have completed only 15% of the book. So as per my experience, it'll take us around 3 days. इस बुक को ख़त्म करने में 3 दिन लगेंगे हमें। और अगर मैंने थोड़ी स्पीड ज़्यादा रखी और अगर आपने साथ दिया तो उससे पहले ही ख़त्म हो जाएगी। अभी एक मसाला इस मंथ का भी है कि इसमें स्ट्रीमिंग के लिए लोग आते नहीं हैं। दैट्स ऑल्सो अ फैक्ट। इस वक्त सब, मैं भी इनफैक्ट बहुत थका हुआ हूँ। मैं भी इस वक्त सोना चाहता था, बट आई सेड टू माई सेल्फ, लेट्स कंप्लीट दिस बुक। बुक रीडिंग इज रियली गुड, रियली वेरी गुड। इससे आप बहुत कुछ सीखते हो। Okay, I have posted the link. Let's see if they turn up or not. वैसे मुझे नहीं लगता वहां से कोई आने वाला है, फिर भी let's wait for some time. I guess I am audible. सो तब तक मैं कुछ सुना देता हूँ आपको। चले, मैं इसके बाद बुक खत्म करने के बाद पढ़ते हैं कुछ। Okay, Cinnamon. Yesterday you were not here. You missed the first part of it. Where is Z? Z किधर है? अब तो बाकी सब लोग आते नहीं हैं। हाँ, ओके, यू वर नॉट एट होम, चलिए कोई नहीं। बट यू मिस द फर्स्ट पार्ट ऑफ इट। बड़ा अच्छा ओपनिंग है इस बुक का, ठीक ठाक ओपनिंग है इसका। इस जोबाई के साथ कांटेक्ट हो गया है। ही इज गुड। उसको थोड़ा, वो थोड़ा बिजी था, मशगूल था। तो अगर आप चाहें तो जो स्ट्रीम पहले कल की थी हमने, तो उसका सुन सकते हो आप वो पार्ट। ठीक है। ओके, जी इज ऑल्सो हियर। नाइस। जी, आई थॉट आप सो गई होंगी। वी हैव मूवी मेनिया हियर। वेलकम टू द स्ट्रीम। ओके, so let us start with the book because we have already wasted almost 7 minutes वेट करते करते। शुरू करें? ओके गाइस, ये भी अपडेट देना था कि वी आर ऑलमोस्ट 30 शॉट ऑफ 1K। 1000 हमारे सब्सक्राइबर्स हो जाएंगे। आई थिंक नहीं, 28 ही रह गए। ओनली 28 रिमेनिंग, एंड आई गेस इट विल टेक अस अनदर 4-5 days। हाँ, 28। हेलो आसिम, हाउ आर यू? आई थिंक 28, इट विल टेक अस अराउंड 4-5-6 days, इतना ही टाइम लगेगा, एंड विल कंप्लीट दैट 1K मार्क। एंड वी हैव कंप्लीटेड 85 वीडियोस। और मुझे लगता है इसमें मेजॉरिटी जो है वो लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग ही है। ओके, सो जितनों को आना था वो तो आ गए। चलिए हम बुक शुरू कर लेते हैं। वालेकुम अस्सलाम हैंसी डेविड। हाँ, मैं भी ठीक। आप ठीक हो आसिम? वालेकुम अस्सलाम मुदस्सिर, हाउ आर यू? आसिम, हाउ आर यू? कैसे हो आप? ठीक ठाक चल रहा है सब। मुदस्सिर, वेयर इज सारिम? सारिम नजर नहीं आ रहे हैं। बिल्कुल खफा है हमसे, अकेले बैठ गए वो क्या। आफ्ताब is here after a lot of time, after a long time. आफ्ताब, वालेकुम अस्सलाम, how are you? कैसे हो आप? वेलकम टू द स्ट्रीम। ओके आसिम, बी स्टे ब्लेस्ड। तो मैं बुक स्टार्ट कर रहा हूँ, ठीक है? अब 9 मिनट्स हो गए। It was fairly clear that someone had frisked my room, and I was fairly sure that they had found nothing they weren't supposed to find. The games had only just begun. The next morning, there was to be a telecon with GL Singhal. There was a text on my phone from Ajay, the photographer friend, asking if I would be interested in a photography exhibition at Ahmedabad Ni Gufa. I kept the phone aside. Mike knocked on my door. He was going for a walk across the foundation and was checking if I wanted to join. December evenings in Gujarat can be very beautiful and chilly. The 2010 winter, though, was particularly harsh. To add to our misery, the hotel was located in an open, underdeveloped forest area. At the hostel, At the hostel, we only had the luxury of one blanket. We opened the suitcase at night and tried to wear everything we could find: t shirts, shirts, sweaters, jeans, everything that could keep us warm. Mike and I wore an extra pair of jackets that evening, decided to walk along the edge of the forest by the foundation building. I turned I turned to look at Mike, who was his usual thoughtful self. Am I doing fine, matey? He asked. Of course. You were very confident, and don't bother about Miss Courtney. She was just too engrossed in the conversation and the words of praise. I replied reassuringly. That night, before I went to bed, I sent a text to Ajay. See you at the exhibition, Tom. The next morning, as I devoured the upma from the canteen, I finally made that phone call to G.L. Singhal. Those days, he was in the eye of the storm. The the High Court appointed special investigative team to look into the Ishrat Jahan encounter that was making headway in the probe, and all eyes were on Singhal. He was the man who had shot Ishrat Jahan in an encounter along with two other officers. A day after the encounter, Gujarat top cop and chief of ATS DG Vanzara had called a press conference. It was a sensation. Ishrat's blood-soaked body, along with those of three others, was lying on the road. She was named a woman Fidain, the first of her kind in India. An LET, Lashkar-e-Toiba operative, who was out to assassinate Narendra Modi, the Chief Minister of Gujarat. Ishrat had become the talk of the town. Narratives were written about jihadist fundamentalism and how radical Muslim organizations were out to seek revenge for the 2002 riots. DG Vanzara was hailed as a hero. He had become an overnight sensation. Sharing the glory with him were the other officers, N.K. Amin, Tarun Barrett, and the man who was of particular interest to me, Girish Singhal. Ishrat's family, in the meantime, had petitioned in the Supreme Court for an inquiry into the murder of their daughter Ishrat Jahan. A judicial committee was appointed by the Gujarat High Court and the verdict was given in 2008. The Justice Tamang committee, headed by an ex magistrate of the Gujarat High Court, gave a verdict that stunned the nation. Ishrat Jahan's encounter was a fake encounter. The case needed further investigation. Human rights activists and lawyers came out on the streets to protest the gross misuse of power by officials to kill innocents following the verdict. The case lay stagnant till the family petitioned the Gujarat High Court for further investigation. It was then a three-member bench was constituted to look into the encounter. Later in 2013, the CBI team appointed by the Gujarat High Court to look into the encounter called it fake and listed top cops in Gujarat police as accused officers. It was thus in 2010 when the case was being investigated by the SIT, ordered by the Supreme Court to do so, that I first sought an appointment with Singhal. The phone rang. I introduced myself in my accented English. The response was not very forthcoming. Singhal asked me to call him later. All my hopes were pinned on this man. He was the man I had to begin my investigations with. How would I proceed? I wondered. The newspapers that morning had spoken of Singhal's imminent arrest by the SIT. In a tense situation like this, it was only normal that Singhal would concern himself with legal remedies rather than talking to some foreign returned filmmaker. I informed Mike that he would not be needed for the day. Mike had become friendly with fellow inmates of the hostel. One of them was a lovely girl called Parnang Guk Lynch, a native of Greenland whom we called as Pani. I suspected Mike was becoming increasingly fond of her. Realizing that he was not required for the day, he offered Pani a photography trip, and she readily agreed. I had my own photography trip that evening, I remembered. Considering that there was not much to do, I went back to my room and began jotting down the events of the last few days. Ajay was busy playing host at his friend's exhibition when I went there later day. I was introduced to everyone as a filmmaker from America. That was enough for the lot to throw technical questions at me. ओके, यहाँ पे कोई नहीं है क्या? क्या मेरी आवाज़ गई? हेलो हेलो हेलो, एवरीबडी गॉन? हेलो, सुन सकते हो मुझे क्या? कौन? जी, यू आर हेयर बस. शैली इज ऑल्सो हेयर. ओके, सो यू पीपल लिसनिंग. मुझे क्यों दिखा रहा है यहाँ पे एक ही बंदा है? व्हाट इज हैपनिंग? इट्स ओनली शोइंग वन पर्सन इज लिसनिंग. चलिए मैं कंटिन्यू करता हूँ. रियली सॉरी, मैंने इंटरप्ट कर लिया. मुझे दिखा रहा है यहाँ पे सिर्फ एक बंदा. आई डोंट नो. चलिए मैं पढ़ता हूँ कोई. That was enough for the lot to throw technical questions at me. Who is doing your camera? What camera are you using? When will you begin shooting? I had rehearsed the responses, anticipating this line of questioning, and calmly answered them. Ajay was visibly impressed. He showed me around Ahmedabad Gufa and gave me a crash course on the history of that place before we settled for a cup of coffee and samosa. Nervous about the task at hand. I was just another at hand. I was just another student. I thought of my student. I thought of my family back home, parents whom I had not spoken to in days, who were anxious about my sudden change of behavior. I had switched off my cell phone. I would communicate with my cell phone. I would communicate with them by dropping in a meal from a local cyber cafe, but not nearly often enough. Ever since I had published the Amit Shah expose, they were worried about my well being all the time. With such thoughts, I asked Ajay if he could drop me at a local market close to my hostel. I had some errands to run, I told him. He dropped me at the Satellite Road shopping area, one of the upmarket areas. To make the errand exercise look genuine, I walked into a supermarket, bought some toiletries, and stepped into a PCO right next to the superstore. This was the safest mode of communication. I dialed our landline number. My mother, who has been a constant source of strength and had built a facade of being strong, took the call. She wanted me to come back. This was no journalism when I had to be incommunicado with my own family. I reassured her as much as I could and hung up, feeling desolate inside. The next morning, I called up Singhal again, and this time he said he would meet me. The harrowing journey that my investigation was going to take me on had finally begun. Chapter 3. G.L. Singhal. Girish Singhal's eldest son, Hardik, committed suicide in 2012. Those close to him suggest it broke his father. I met Singhal that morning in 2010 after a telephone conversation. Mike accompanied me after being thoroughly briefed about sensitivity of the situation. Singhal was no ordinary man. He was in charge of the Gujarat ATS. At this time, due to the SIT investigation, Singhal's moves were being monitored closely, and he was being cautious of the people he was meeting. His arrest was inevitable. The SIT was speeding up its inquiry. Two junior officers had already been arrested. Singhal could be the next. The charges against him and the other officers included, among other things, conspiring, staging, and killing an innocent girl in the name of terror. The phenomenon was not new for Gujarat. There was an atmosphere of hostility that prevailed post riots. It was clear that the not so amicable relationship between the two communities had taken a turn for the worse. Narendra Modi was being seen as the Hindu leader who had saved the Gujarati Asmita from invasion. Both communities had suffered with the Godhra train burning and the carnage in Gujarat after night. Gujarat right after. Those who had come in the line of fire were bureaucrats and officers, but nothing could be proved against them. Commissions of inquiry would, over the years, have used the harshest words of criticism for the authorities and their actions or inaction. At that time, but barring a few foot soldiers, most remained in positions of power. Perhaps emboldened by this, a slew of encounters took place in Gujarat, most of which were later to be labeled as fake by none less than the Supreme Court of India. Encounters which are a part for an encounters which were a part of an effort to portray the danger ahead of Gujarati Asmita. The trajectory of fake encounters in Gujarat had a sordid pattern. Samir Khan Pathan, Sadiq Jamal, Ishrat Jahan, Javed Alias, Paranesh Pillai, Sohrabuddin, Tulsiram Prajapati. These are just some encounter cases from Gujarat which are being monitored by the highest judicial bodies in the country. A brief look at the cases is enough to blow the lid off a saga of meticulously planned and executed murders. In one of my most exhaustive exposures of them, Deputy PM LK Advani and ultra Hindutva firebrands such as Praveen Tagodia and Jaydeep Patil in the communally polarized aftermath of Gujarat 2002. Such false propaganda was like a match to Tinder. It can be no one's case that absolutely no Muslim boys were involved in terror blasts in the country, but to cynically manufacture threats and bill petty criminals as terrorists was only to serve to tar the entire Muslim community as international and help consolidate Modi as the Hindu Hriday Samrat, a man not a man not only capable of teaching Hindu enemies a lesson, but one under constant threat from jihadi groups. An earlier Tehelka An earlier Tehelka story had demonstrated that Sohrabuddin, who was a petty criminal and an extortionist, was well known to Shah before he was demonstrated that Sohrabuddin, who was a petty criminal and an extortionist, was well known to Shah before he was killed, and had raised uncomfortable questions about why Sohrabuddin was bumped off and billed as a terrorist. It is significant to remember that Shah was not only Home Minister at that time and directly responsible for the workings of the state police, but a man who was so close to Modi that he held over a dozen ministerial portfolios. Discredited police officer Vanzara, in turn, was very close to Shah. However, it was the cold blooded killing of the 19-year-old Ishrat Jahan which had Singhal in the line of fire. His role in the another fake only amounted to obfuscation in the course of investigation by the concerned body. I first met Giri Singhal that morning as I reached his high security office with Mike in the Shahi Bagh area in Singhal's past laurels included the successful handling of Akshardham attack which got him past laurels included the successful handling of Akshardham attack which got him the State Bravery Award. It's very unlikely for an officer of Jil Singhal's age to achieve the kind of recognition he did, but most in his department would vouch for it. The security guard at the ATS office was confused. A woman in a skirt sporting a bandana and a foreigner who wanted to meet the ATS chief. A note was sent into him. Within minutes, a constable walked up to the guard and whispered in Gujarati that we were some foreigner filmmaker guys who had to come to meet Sahib. There was a look of awe on the guard's face as Mike and I was escorted inside. Mike was his usual charming self. Any other 19-year-old would have been palpitating in the situation, but not him. I was a little apprehensive about him though. Did he completely completely understand the seriousness of the situation and the risk associated with it, I wondered. Any doubts I had in matter were cleared as we entered the waiting room. We waited with a group of constables and senior police officials in civil clothes, and the white, sturdy sport shoes distinguished them from the civilians. A television set played a Bollywood film which caught Mike's interest. It was a Govinda film which had some of the officials hooked while the rest went on their routine work. One of the most curious ones came and sat next to Mike, who greeted him with a polite namaste. In broken English, a conversation ensured that which ranged from his love for their food and to details of the foreign land. Mike was in complete control of the situation with no evident nerves or over enthusiasm whatsoever. Metli Tiagi, aapko sahib bulate hain, said they orderly. Act 1 had begun. Girish Singhal, a man in his early 40s, saw well dressed, well mannered, held a half smoked cigarette between his fingers as he asked us in. He was watching a video on his laptop. There were a couple of books by Osho on his table. Are you an Osho follower? I asked even as I sat down, carefully placing my diary on my desk. My video recorder was attached to it. I had earlier decided that I would acquaint myself with my subjects before secretly recording their conversations. But Singhal was known to be a temperamental man. What if he said something significant and I did not have my recorder on me? And what if he refused to give me an appointment later? I introduced Mike to Singhal. There was a brief acknowledgement, and I turned to explain to him the reason for our visit in my fake accent. Singhal listened to me seriously, grasping each and every word I spoke and nodding at intervals. Once I knew I had his attention, I attempted to drop some familiar questions and names. Actually, Mayaben was very impressed with you and thought you were one of the brightest officers in the state. We are also profiling her for our film. It had the required effect. The grim, serious look on his face relaxed. He gave an acknowledging smile and said, "She's a very good lady, very spiritual." I thought it better not to focus on anything related to controversies that he was surrounded by. A show of naivety and awe seemed to be easier way to break the ice. He narrated stories of his childhood, his desire to fight the upper class, the Brahminical attitude of his neighbors towards the Dalit family, and being the breadwinner for his family. Or joining the police force for a source of redemption. Inequality breeds everywhere, even in this system which I am a part of, he responded. What started off as an appointment for 15 minutes stretched to an hour. Mike continued to diligently take notes of details every time I asked him to, while Grace Singhal narrated stories about what had made him he was, from the shop owner who hit him with a cane when he tried to touch something at his shop because of his low caste, to tales of bravado of an ancestors who had entered the Akshardham temple. Mike smiled large on his face as he talked. He blushed when I complimented him on his achievements. At a time when everything around him seemed to be at risk. Perhaps this acknowledgement from an outsider made him feel relaxed. We were served adrak chai while we soaked in the details of the mock grill. The meeting opened doors for us. We were given another appointment the next week, but something else came up in the conversation that looked promising. When we were speaking about the caste system and specifically about those who managed to scale to the top in spite of belonging to the backward class, Singhal mentioned a man whom he called Senator Rajan Priya Darshani, the ex-head of ATS Gujarat, for whom he had great respect. Priyadarshi, he informed us, also belonged to the OBC class and would help shape our documentary and gave it respect to. He had retired a year ago and lived in Ahmedabad with his family. Perhaps convinced of our intentions, he also offered to recommend us to Sir so we could meet him easily. After an hour of talking with Singhal, Mike and I stepped out of the heavily maned ATS headquarters. We were both quiet and nodded at the security guard on our way out, who now offered headquarters, also hailed us an auto for us. A kilometer into the drive, we looked at each other and smiled. It's going the right way, isn't it? Mike asked. I nodded. Over the next few days, he, we, decide to, we decided to give Singhal a break. Hounding him with phone calls would only sound desperate and appear suspicious. In between, I sent him a few texts to inform him of all the research we had done on him and just how impressed we were with his dedication and commitment to the state. The day of our next appointment arrived soon. This time, I decided to let Mike stay behind. I had learned this lesson while interviewing politicians or having off the record conversations with officials. They were always comfortable with fewer people around and someone simply jotting down notes. As far as a record of the conversation was concerned, that day I was even better prepared than before. Singal's attitude towards us in our previous meeting had emboldened me to believe that the next meeting could be revelational in the nature. I was not disappointed. That afternoon, I carefully unplugged my green custom made kurta from the charging point. The upper part of the kurta, embellished in the dark Kashmiri embroidery, camouflaged a tiny hole that was an inlet for the camera that was attached inside. There was a thin wire that went down further, which had a small button attached to it. I needed to switch this button on and off every time I had to record something. It was a tricky affair. There was a red light which went on every time I switched on the camera button. While I had practiced it enough, there was always this apprehension that the light had not come on. To make sure I would allow my pen to roll down the desk and fall. While bending towards down to pick it up, I would quickly peep inside the kurta to check the red light was indeed on. That day I stepped inside the headquarters, there was a familiar nod from the security guard who took me for some sort of an NRI filmmaker. Such was the impression the orderly had given of me to most officers, and a cheerful, Madam, shooting nahi karoge kya? I nodded, indicating I would begin work soon. I entered Singal's cabin that afternoon, expecting in all honesty to be greeted with a pleasant hello, but from the look on his face, it was obvious that something was wrong. He was watching some footage that had been provided to him. It was a stingy footage of some miscreants in his residential locality. For an officer of the level of ATS in charge, this was hardly an issue. It was something else. Some officials from the police force were creating trouble for him. But then he cut it short. He went back to being his typical cheerful self. He was curious about the research I had done on him. He wanted to know if I had inquired about him with others and if I had received positive reports about it. It was time for me to switch on to playing the naive girl from the Los Angeles who had no linking of the situation back home, who was in awe of the man of sting in front of her, who had gunned down terrorists in one of the most high profile terror attacks of the country. You're so brave. So I actually went about doing a Google search on the Akshardam attacks of war. It was stunning. He lit a cigarette and asked me to proceed with my questions. As it unraveled, I got a glimpse into his rather troubled life. The answers were mostly cryptic, but the long silence, the studied gaze, the taping on of the fingers on the desk with the troubled look spoke volumes. I had anticipated Singhal to be careful with his thoughts and responses, but it seemed that imagining a rather harmless interviewer before him made him want to talk that day. I volunteered to meet him at his place along with his family, his children, his wife. Oh, please, don't. They are already troubled. They don't like what I do. They have started to hate my job. When a policeman comes home, I ask them to park at a distance, not come anywhere close to my doorstep. Soon after, he mentioned the encounters, which made it easy for me to transition to questioning him about them. As I write this book, following his arrest, Singhal had already confessed his role to the CBI. Not just this, he had also proved in his statements and audio recordings of a taped conversation the complicity of many state government officials in the staged encounter of Ishrat Jahan. The Gujarat High Court appointed CBI probe has its own in its charge sheet concluded that Ishrat Jahan was not an LET operative, Lashkar-e-Toiba operative, and that the encounter was fake. The charge sheet that has been presented to the court takes into account the evidence given by Singhal to the CBI. It's important to note that the confession made by him and his arrest came soon after the untimely demise of his eldest son, Hardik, about whom Singhal had spoken fondly when I first met him. Upset with the constant bad press his father received, his son committed suicide in 2013, and those close to Singhal suggest that it brought about a change of heart. The latest news from his friend is that he had resigned from police force and had refused to take back his resignation in spite of being prodded by the government to do so. It is interesting that Singhal also told that the CBI that he did not wish to turn approver or demand clemency but undergo a trial like most of the co-accused. It is difficult to read another's mind, and one can only surmise based on what one knows about the other person. But Singhal's strange request to the CBI takes me back to the conversation that took place between us in December 2010. Excerpts from the recorded conversation with Singhal. Question: there is so much that you cops in Gujarat have to take, especially with the controversies. Answer: it's a funny situation. If somebody comes to us with a compliment and we satisfy the compliment, we upset the government, and if we please the government, we upset the compliment. So what do we do? The police is got. Most of the officers involved in the fake encounters are from the lower caste. Most of them have been used and abandoned by the political system. Question: yes, all of them in the police department. It's a powerful department. Answer. Yes, all of them in the police department. It's a powerful department. Question: how have the riots affected the state, the police? Answer: see, I have served in Gujarat during the riots and I have been here since 1991. So I have seen many riots. We have seen riots in 82, 83, 85, 87, and 92 post Ayodhya. Muslims were more dominant in 2002, more Muslims were killed. See, with Muslims, it's like this. Especially in 2002, it was like this. Muslims were killing Hindus all those years. So whatever happened in 2002 was a retaliation for all those years of being beaten by Muslims, and everybody across the world created havoc. They did not see the situation in which Hindus were killed. Question: I met Rajan Priyadarshi, the person you had asked me to speak to as a Dalit. Answer: oh, you know, I have served in various positions and with almost all possible officers in the state. I am in the middle of hierarchy, so I think I have worked with everybody, but I don't think I have ever come across somebody like him. He's the most upright officer. He's an officer with who knows everything about policing. Question: and he said the government wanted him to compromise, but he never did. Answer: oh yes, he never did that. I know him. I know him. Question: is it really difficult to know not compromise and still be a part of the system? Answer: once you compromise, you have to compromise with everything: yourself, your thoughts, conscience. Question: and is it difficult for an officer in Gujarat to live with his conscience? Answer: yes, yes. And when an officer, senior officer, who has an understanding of the law compromises, then it becomes difficult. Question: that's what happened with you. How much did you have to fight? Answer: there are certain people who will try and put up a fight. There are those who will keep fighting till the time they die. Priyadarshi is one of them. What about you? Even I have. But does this system support you? No, not in the least. I am Dalit. But I can do everything like a Brahmin. I know my religion much more than them. But people do not realize this. If I am born in a Dalit family, is it my fault? Question. And has it ever happened that, in spite of serving them, when it comes to your promotions, you are not given it because of your caste? Answer: yes, many a times. See, it's rampant in many states and it's rampant in Gujarat. These Brahmins or Kshatriyas will not have a Dalit or an OBC as a junior. Is your senior a Dalit too? Answer: no. But I am managing. I am indispensable for them. I have countered cases of terrorism for them. But yes, they do their bit. At times, they will send me to a job that can be done by constables. Question: Usha was telling me that you were embroiled in some controversy. Answer. In 2004, we had encountered four people. Two were Pakistanis and two were from Mumbai. And among them, one was a girl. Her name was Ishrat. It's a very popular case. The High Court has directed to investigate what kind of encounter it was, fake or genuine. Question. So is it fake? And why are you in this? Answer. Because I was there in that encounter. Question. But why are you in it? Answer. See, all the human rights commissions, it's all what they do. You know, certain cases are difficult and you have to tackle them differently. Look at what America did post 9/11. There was a place called Guantanamo. They were kept there, detained, tortured. मगर ठीक है ना, not everybody is tortured. There are 10% who have been tortured, and even if they have not committed anything, 1% may be wrong. So this has to be done to save the nation, to save the country. Question. So who are these people? Lashkari terrorists? Answer. Ha. Question. The girl also, Ishrat? See, she was not, but when she was killed in the same incident, I mean, she could have been or not have been, or she could have been used as a cover. Question. I mean, all of you, Vanzara, Pandian, Amin, Parmar, and most of others, all are overcast, all work to be the at the behest of the state in whatever you did. So it's like a use or abundant thing. Oh, yes, all of us, the government doesn't think this. They think we are used to being bound to their word and fulfill their requirements. Every government servant, whatever he does, works for the government. Then both the society and the government don't recognize you. What Vanzara has done, nobody stood by him. But sir, whatever you guys did, it was at the behest of the government, the political power. So why don't they? सिस्टम के साथ रहना है तो लोगों को कंप्रोमाइज करना पड़ता है. But Priyadarshi was not close to government. He was close to the government, but every time they would ask him to do something wrong, he would refuse to do so. Yeah, he told me that they had asked him to do an encounter, including Mr. Pandian, but he refused. Pandian is also behind bars, although I don't know much about his background. Question. How did he so close to the Home Minister? Yes, he was in the intelligence department before being in the ATS. See, I know that both the CM and HM are doing things for themselves. So are things easy for you now? Answer. Certain things are not in our hands. We have done things for the system. Are you on the radar or is your case done? The case is going on very much. So is the state helping you or not? See, whether it's Congress or BJP, political parties are political parties. They will see their benefit. Under their circumstances, they can extract something. In our case, they are helping, but also trying to see what they will get or not. If it backfires, then what will they gain from it? Answer. Look at the people who are investigating our encounter. Karnail Singh, who was the Joint Commissioner of the Police in Delhi for the special cell, who has been transferred to Mizoram. During his tenure, 44 encounters took place. And he is now the chairman of our SIT. Then there is an officer called Satish Verma, who boasts of being a follower of human rights. He did some 10 encounters. He seems to suggest he is a clean one. What will be the logical end? Let's see, nothing will come out. But you and a lot of officers were also involved in the Sohrabuddin case, right? Yes. I met Geeta Johri. Oh, yes, she did a very good investigation, and later Rajneesh Rai. They did a good job. They arrested some 13 people by themselves. Question. But what's with this Amit Shah thing? Also, I hear about your officers. I mean, there is some kind of officer political group, especially vis-a-vis encounters. I got this feeling as I got to meet a lot of ministers. See, even the CM, all the ministers that are there, and the ministers, they are rubber stamps. All decisions are taken by the CM. Whatever decisions all the ministers make, they have to take his permission. How does he manage to remain unscathed? Then, including your case, why has he not been indicted in the same case? Because he does not come, as in appear in the picture directly. He gives orders to bureaucrats. By the same benchmark, if Amit Shah was arrested in your case, then the CM should also have been arrested. Yes, in 2007, just after the officers were arrested for the Sohrabuddin encounter, Sonia Gandhi was here and she called the officers Maut ke Sodagar. After that, Modi went out shouting at every meeting, Maut ke Sodagar. Sohrabuddin कौन था? उसका उसको मारा तो अच्छा हुआ कि नहीं हुआ? And after that, he got the thumping majority. See, he got what he wanted. And the officers, question, and the officers through which he got it done, he is not helping them now. Answer, nahi, they are in jail. Question, did he ever question you about your encounters? No, he never did. देखो इनको सबका बेनिफिट लेना होता है, राइट्स हुए, मुस्लिम को मारा, बेनिफिट लिया, इस पर भी किया. But will your Shah Sahib now come back to the Home Department? No, he won't be able to because CM को उससे डर लगता है क्योंकि वो होम डिपार्टमेंट में बहुत पॉपुलर हो गया था. He knows the weakness of the government, so the CM will not want any attempt to know everything and be there. Question. So the chief minister and the home minister do not see eye to eye now. No, this CM मोदी जैसे भी आप बोल रहे थे वो अपॉर्चुनिस्ट है. आप काम निकालिए. Sub got his work. His dirty work? हाँ. So how many encounters have you done besides this one? Around 10 शायद. All prominent ones, Canon? No, no, no. The fact that the investigation into fake encounters dominated the headlines in the Gujarat editions of the dailies only created an alibi for me to ask probing questions of Singhal without arousing suspicion. As days went by and as I met Singhal, there was a sense of guilt and empathy that I began to feel. Was he really an innocent man wronged by the system, as he would have liked me to believe? He would give me instances or remind me of the various characters from the films to draw an analogy with his own situation. The conversation drifting to verses from Bhagavad Gita and his dependence on religion, we would talk about Osho and my smoking habit. Let leave it if you can, he suggested. Not good. He was developing a fond friendship with me. I was an outsider who was not there to judge him from an insider's perspective. I could not really figure what this man was all about, and on one of the days when I returned to my hostel, I headed straight to the PCO. I felt terribly confused and decided I had to ask Amma. I was feeling sympathetic towards Singhal. I could not afford to do so. He did not have the brethren attitude of officers whom I had met earlier, who gloated about cold blooded murders and encounters. But there could be no justification for cold blooded killings. If an individual was part of it, or if he or she was an official who had decided to sleep over the truth, as my mother said to me, that there would be individuals who could give you many reasons for their behavior, for their actions. All you have to do is to go back and see what it was that they had actually done, and you would know if their justifications held any weight. It was clear to me. It was clear to me that by keeping quiet over the years, Singhal was as complicit in the crime as others. But one could not help but notice that brazen use of such vulnerable cops by the state administration. The use and abandon policy about which Singhal had spoken on the hidden camera that I carried cropped up years later when another top officer, DG Vanzara, complained of it. Vanzara, one of the topmost officers from the Modi dispensation, who has been behind bars for his role in four fake encounters, reiterated in a letter to the Gujarat state government everything Singhal had said about this. That officers like him were being used to realize the ambitions of ministers like Amit Shah, and that the man whom he considered his God, Chief Minister Narendra Modi, had betrayed him. Whether there is any political motive behind Vanzara's statement, who has since resigned from the state IPS, is something that will remain ambiguous. But the fact remains that many officers like him and Singhal had been used as the altar of what is now claimed as a terror free state. Singhal was not the aberration, he was the norm. This was something that I was to discover in the days to come from his senior Rajan Priyadarshani, as well as a former as well as from a former police commissioner of the state and other bureaucrats. The hunt for the truth had just only begun. Chapter 4, Rajan Priyadarshi. In corporate language, there is a term called takeaway. It refers to something profitable that one takes away after a conference meeting or conversation. Rajan Priyadarshi was an accidental takeaway, as one would say. Going by the immense value addition this retired cop made to my investigation, I must confess that I had never come across a cop by the name of Rajan Priyadarshi till the moment his junior Girish Singhal spoke about him during our conversation. I had reported extensively from Gujarat and knew most police officers there, or so I believed. I had not met many, but news reports and interviews with the police fraternity ensured that I had enough information on the relevant ones. It was surprising, therefore, when Singhal mentioned his name, that I was entirely unfamiliar with. I had absolutely no research on him before I went to meet him. The only reason I did it was not to arouse any suspicion in Singal's mind and to soothe his nerves about going about diligently as per the advice. It helped Singhal gain confidence in me that I was meeting the other cops too, especially those who were non controversial, who were not in the news. There was another interesting aspect about Rajan Priyadarshi. In an interview given to the Times of India in June 2004, Priyadarshi, a 1980 batch officer, IPS officer, had said that despite being one of the high ranking officials in the state, he was still treated as an untouchable in his village. The Times of India News report said. People from different walks of life often approach him with folded hands, with numerous problems. But when same Priyadarshi decides to visit his native Kadagra village in Dehgam Taluka, the equation changed dramatically. The senior cop still cannot buy a house in the locality inhabited by the higher castes of the village. He continues to have a house in the Dalit Vas of Kadagra. Though Priyadashi does not want to speak on the subject, sources say that till last year, even the village barber did not entertain Dalit customers. Technically speaking, this made my job much easier from the point of view of the film. Additionally, by the end of the investigation, there was enough material to suggest that most of the officers being manipulated and mistreated by the administration were from backward class. But I had missed something very important. Rajan Priyadarshi was the Gujarat ATS Director General in 2007 when the investigation into the fake encounters was undertaken by the Gujarat CID. Not just this, he also held a very significant posting as the Inspector General of Rajkot during 2002 riots. And so Mike and I met Rajan Priyadarshi. I don't think we can ever forget our first meeting with this 60 something individual. He had a one story bungalow in one of the middle class localities of Ahmedabad, Naroda Patia. It was that same constituency where another of our subjects, Maya Ben Kodani, was an MLA. It is also the same area which saw the most gruesome criminal raids and where the maximum casualties took place. We had a tough time locating Priyadarshi's home. It was rather an unassuming location for an ex ATS chief who had held some of the most significant postings across Gujarat for over 30 years. There was a garment school and many chawls and nalas that one had to cross to reach his residence. Not many were aware of his existence, but his next door neighbors identified him as the police wala who had his own photograph framed and hung at the entrance of his house. Priyadarshi was waiting anxiously for us, waving to us as our taxi entered his lane. Welcome, he cheered from the first floor of his residence. Both of us entered his house, soaking in its rather unassuming detail. There was a plaque right at the entrance which had detailed of the various postings Priyadarshi had held in his career. As we entered, a rather boisterous gentleman with the moustache of a village pahalwan and graying beard shook our hand. Two cotton shawls, pens, and notebooks were handed to us. What transpired in the next few minutes was hilarious. Priyadarshi took an instant liking to Mike. The Nimbu Pani arrived. We had just about recovered from the shock how generously we were being welcomed when a man in his early 30s entered the room with a 10-year-old boy. They were Priyadarshi's son and grandson, and the latter was carrying a digital camera. It's not every day that we have foreign filmmakers at our place. It's our honor. One photograph, please, we were told. When you are undercover, the last thing you want to do is to be in the public eye or leave traces of your undercover existence. But refusing to let the photographs be taken would not really have helped in the situation. Also, a brief glance at the plaque with the chronology of his career graph suggested that Priyadarshi could be of help. Mike and I compiled with his grandson's wishes, and a couple of photographs were taken before we were escorted to the living room. There was a photograph of Priyadarshi with state and cabinet ministers and ex-prime minister, with the ex-prime minister Rajiv Gandhi in the living room. So you wish to frame our photographs, sir? I asked, eagerly curious to know the purpose of the photos for which we had posed. We were informed that he published a local news supplement on a monthly basis and he circulated it for free to people he knew. That was a relief. We let go of that conversation with the assurance that he would use the photos only when we had introduced ourselves to all the subjects of the film in Gujarat. We would not want unwanted attention, sir. We would want to keep a low profile, I requested, and he courteously obliged. The conversation was a monologue. In a span of an hour, we realized that Priyadarshi had given us enough material to write a brief for his biography. He was in every sense a character, the kind you catch a glimpse of in a film or a novel. But this meeting would help me with some very relevant insights into the manner in which the state machinery worked in Gujarat. He shocked us with the details about the village barber who would refuse to cut his hair and therefore he had to build a house in the Dalit Nivas despite holding the position of IG, border range of Gujarat. The Dalit tag continued to haunt him. On many occasions during his tenure in the Gujarat police force, he was forced to do his seniors' dirty work, but he refused to take orders. It was very strange, it was like if you're a Dalit, anybody in the office can get away with saying anything. There was no dignity attached. I mean, a Dalit officer can be asked to commit cold blooded murder because he apparently had no self respect, no ideals. Upper caste in the Gujarat police are the ones in everyone's good books. As our meeting progressed, Priyadashi seemed to become increasingly anxious, but by then he had already said too much. During the third meeting with us, I went to see him alone. I had decided to rest Mike for the day so that he could go to Maya Kodani's office for a rest for our shoot. It was something Mike had himself suggested. Should we not do something to make them believe that we are actual filmmakers? Kodani's staff members were more than happy to show him around. In the evening, there was a message for her. Did I want any specific location in the house? And if we would be interested in a Sunday lunch made by her? I replied with a prompt yes. That day, when I met Priyadarshi, he had shifted through the copies of the newspaper he had published. You can take whatever you want from these. I think you have all the information about me now. When do you start shooting? He was anxious. His body language made it clear. He had divulged a bit too much for his own good. Details of the same Details of the time when he was posted as the state ATS head of his clandestine meetings with the then Home Minister Amit Shah late at night at his bungalow and who once asked him to kill an accused in custody. Every time I met Rajan Priyadarshi, I felt I came back with more. I think this is more than enough. We have completed another part of the book, 30%. तो यहाँ पे कौन कौन है अभी बता दीजिए. हेलो मुदस्सिर, आप यहीं पे हो. गुड. कैसी लगी आपको बुक? 30% हो गया, ठीक है। अभी और 70% बचता है। कल हम अराउंड 60% तक करेंगे। हेलो जी। हाँ, मौलाना अयूब ने बहुत बढ़िया काम किया है अभी तक, ऐसा लग रहा है। देखते हैं आगे क्या क्या होता है। ठीक है ना। ओके, आफ्ताब शेख इज ऑल्सो हियर। हम 60 तक जाएंगे, 50 तक, कम से कम 50, 55, ताकि हम इसको 4 दिन में खत्म करें इस बुक को। इट्स गुड कि आप यहाँ पे रहे मौजूद और आपने ये बुक सुन ली। दैट्स नाइस। व्हाट एल्स कैन वी डू हियर? ओह, बासित साहब यहाँ आए थे, मैसेज डिलीट करके चले गए। क्या कर रहे थे ये? ओके, सो हु एल्स इज हियर? जी, मुदस्सिर एंड आफ्ताब, तीन नाम। चलिए, एक पोयम पढ़ लेते हैं रूमी की, उसके बाद एंड कर लेते हैं परहैप्स। कल फिर से मिलेंगे यहीं पे हम। फिर से हम पढ़ेंगे, ई बुक कंटिन्यू करेंगे। बाकी सब लिसनर्स कहाँ हैं? क्या बुक पसंद नहीं है उनको? अरे बुक्स पढ़ा करो, वो भी क्लासिकल बुक्स उठाया करो, उनको पढ़ा करो, तभी जाके सूझबूझ आएगी और मच्योर हो जाओगे। मैं रूमी बुक देख रहा हूँ, देखते हैं पोएम्स में कौन सी पोएम पढ़ेंगे। हमने कहाँ तक पढ़ी थी अभी तक? ये म्यूजिक मास्टर ये पढ़ लिया था हमने। म्यूजिक मास्टर पढ़ लिया था। अमन डिगिंग द ग्राउंड ये भी पढ़ लिया था। रीजिंग मस्ट चेंज लेखा के रिलेटेड ये भी पढ़ लिया था। ये भी पढ़ लिया था। द गेस्ट हाउस, ये मैंने कहा था इसमें कुरान की वर्स आप कैसे कर पाओगे। हाँ, पिक एक्स शायद यही पढ़नी है हमें। हाँ, यही पढ़नी, हु मेक्स these changes. Okay, Shelley is also here. So the poem is who makes these changes? Who makes these changes? I shoot an arrow right, it lands left. I ride after a deer and find myself chased by a hog. I plot to get what I want and end up in prison. I dig pits and trap others and fall in. I should be suspicious of what I want. Why wine is forbidden? When the prophet's ray of intelligence struck the dim-witted man he was with, the man got very happy and talkative. Soon he began unmannerly raving. This is the problem with the selflessness that comes quickly, as with wine. If the wine drinker has a deep gentleness in him, he show that when drunk. But if he has hidden anger and arrogance, those appear. And since most of the people do, wine is forbidden to everyone. On resurrection day, On resurrection day, your body testifies against you. Your hands say, I stole money. Your lips, I said madness. Your feet, I went where I shouldn't. Your genitals, me too. They will make your praying sound hypocritical. Let the body's doing speak openly now, without your saying a word, as a student's walking behind a teacher says, this one knows more clearly than I the way. The dream that must be interpreted. This place is a dream. Only a sleeper considers it real. Then death comes like dawn, and you wake up laughing at what you thought was your grief. But there's a difference with this dream. Everything cruel and unconscious, done in the illusion of the present world, and all that does not fade away at the death talking. It stays, and it must be interpreted. All the mean laughing, all the quick sexual wanting, those torn coats of Yusuf, they change into the powerful wolves that you must face. The retaliation that sometimes comes now, the swift payback hit, is just a boy's game to what the other will be. You know about circumcision here. It's full castration here. And this groggy time we live, this is what it's like. A man goes to sleep in the town where he has always lived, and he dreams he's living in another town. A dream. In the dream, he doesn't remember the town he is sleeping in his bed in. He believes the reality of the dream town. The world is that kind of sleep. The dust of many crumbles tears settles over us like a forgetful doze. But we are older than those tears. We began as a mineral. We emerge into a plant life and into the animal state and then into human being. And always have we have forgotten our former states, except in early spring when we slightly recall being green again. That's how a young person turns towards a teacher. That's how a baby leans toward the breast, without knowing the secret of its desire, yet turning instinctively. Humankind is being led along an evolving course through this migration of intelligences. And though we seem to be sleeping, there's an inner wakefulness that directs the dream, and that will eventually startle us back to the truths of who we are. The pickaxe, some commentary on I was a hidden treasure, and I desire to be known. Tear down this house. 100,000 new houses can be built from the transparent yellow carnelian buried beneath it. And the only way to get to that is to do the work of demolishing and then digging under the foundations. With that value in hand, all the new construction will be done without effort. And anyway, sooner or later, this house will fall on its own. The devil treasure will be uncovered, but it won't be yours then. The buried wealth is your pay for doing demolition. The pick and the shawl work. If you wait and just let it happen, you would bite your hand and say, I didn't do as I knew I should have. This is a rented house. You don't own the deed. You have a lease and you have set up a little shop where you barely make a living sewing patches on torn clothing, yet only a few feet underneath are two veins, pure red and bright gold carnelian. Quick, take the pickaxe and pry the foundation. You have got to quit this seamstress work. What does the patch swing mean? You ask. Eating and drinking. The heavy cloak of the body is always getting torn. Your patch is it. You patch it with food and other restless ego satisfaction. Rip up one board from the shop floor and look into the basement. You will see two glints into the dirt. So यहाँ मैं थोड़ा सा मैं समझाता हूँ हल्का सा ये क्या है आंखें गजल हैं आपकी ओर चेहरा है गुलाम जॉन का नाम मोहम्मद मजाज है अच्छा यहाँ पे देखिए यहाँ समझिएगा इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस पोएम यहाँ पे देखिए जो कह रहे हैं ना कि ये जो इमारत है इसको ढहा दो रूमी से उर्दू में समझा रहा हूँ ये जो इमारत आपने खड़ी की है द बिल्डिंग यू हैव एक्चुअली बिल्ट यू शुड एक्चुअली dismantle it. Why? ये जो what is he saying? Basically, what does this mean? He means that we are not permanent beings. हम जो यहाँ पे हैं हम परमानेंट नहीं हैं We are something temporary. And before you are being taken away, यहाँ पे ये कह रहे हैं ना, you have a lease and you have set up a little shop where you barely make a living sewing patches on torn clothings. इसका मतलब ही यही है कि आपको जरा सी मोहलत दी गई है इस दुनिया में रहने के लिए. You have been given little time and this time is pure examination where you will be put to test by God. और आपको वो फुलफिल करना है, ठीक है, अकॉर्डिंगली टू द सिचुएशन. एंड बिफोर डेथ टेक्स यू अवे, जो है ना यहाँ पे जो कह रहे हैं कि ये वाला, you only yet only a few feet underneath are two winds pure red and quick take the pickaxe and pry the foundation. You have got to quit this seamstress. What does the patch swing mean, you ask. Eat and drinking is always on you patch. ये वाली लाइन और ये वाली लाइन मुझे भूल गई थी. हाँ, ये वाला. With that value in hand, all the new construction will be done without effort. And anyway, sooner or later, this house will fall on its own. So it is inevitable. What is inevitable? Death is inevitable. So when death comes, it doesn't ask you कि आप आपको टाइम मोहलत नहीं दी जाती. ज़्यादा नहीं समझाऊंगा मैं, थोड़ा थोड़ा ऊपर ऊपर से समझा रहा हूँ कि आपको मोहलत नहीं दी जाती है. एंड यू हैव टू, ये पिकैक्स है ना, टू dismantle your house. Basically, Rumi is trying to say to dismantle your old thinking, old self, ये इगोइस्टिक पर्सनैलिटी जो आपने डेवलप की है ओवर द टाइम, इसको तोड़ दो, मरोड़ दो. और आप क्या करो, एक इसके अंदर छुपा हुआ है, यानी कि हमारे दिलों के अंदर जो हमारे यहाँ नूरानियत छुपी हुई है. एम आई ऑडिबल? हाँ, जो कि हमारे यहाँ कनेक्शन, स्पिरिचुअल कनेक्शन छुपे हुए हैं अल्लाह ताला के साथ जुड़ने के लिए, वो आप उनको उभारिए, उनको उन पे मेहनत कीजिए. और वही तो जेवल है आपके पास. और बस आपको करना क्या है, जो इगोइस्टिक बैरियर आ रहे हैं आपके और स्पिरिचुअल वर्ल्ड के बीच में, जो आपके अंदर ही छुपा है, उसको ढहा दीजिए बिफोर डेथ टेक्स यू अवे. और अगर डेथ ने आपको एक बार ले लिया, फिर आपको कभी मौका नहीं दिया जाएगा वापस मुड़ने के लिए. दिस इज व्हाट दिस पोएम इज ऑल अबाउट. ठीक है, फिर से मैं पढ़ूंगा, अब आप समझिएगा. द कमेंट्री on on I was a hidden treasure and I desire to be known, tear down this house. 100,000 new houses can be built from the transparent yellow carnelian buried beneath it. And the only way to get to that is to do the work of demolishing and then digging under the foundations. With that value in hand, all the new constructions will be done without effort. And anyway, sooner or later, this house will fall on its own. The jewel treasure will be uncovered, but it won't be yours then. The varied wealth is your pay for the doing of demolition, the pick and the shovel work. If you wait and just let it happen, you would bite your hand and say I didn't do as I. यहाँ पे ये जो लिखा है ना, you if you wait and let it happen, you would bite your hand and say I didn't do as I knew I should have. This is the rent. ये कुरान की वर्स है जहाँ पे when a person's life will be taken, तो पर्सन क्या कहेगा, he will be saying या लाइतनी, या लाइतनी, या लाइतनी, मुझे एक फिर से ना मौका दे दो, ओ माय लॉर्ड, गिव मी अनदर चांस. तो वो चांस नहीं मिलेगा. वो चिल्ला चिल्ला के कहेगा कि इफ आई कुड गेट एन अनदर चांस आई विल एक्चुअली डू द थिंग्स दैट यू वांटेड मी टू डू. मगर वो चांस नहीं मिलेगा. या लाइतनी वो बहुत बार चिल्लाएगा. ये जो यहाँ पे लिखा है ना कि, फिर से पढ़ना चाहूंगा, यहाँ पे लिखा है इफ यू वेट एंड जस्ट लेट इट हैपन यू वुड बाइट योर हैंड एंड सी आई डिडंट डू एज आई न्यू आई शुड हैव. दिस इज अ रेंटेड हाउस. ये दुनिया एक रेंटेड हाउस की तरह है. एंड यू डोंट ओन द डीड. चलिए, आई थिंक दिस इज मोर देन इनफ. रूमी की ये पोएम जिस तरह मैं समझाई. इसके बाद और एक पोएम है जिक्र. अ, ये हम पढ़ेंगे, लेकिन ठीक है ना, ये हम या आज ही पढ़ ले, बता दीजिए जल्दी जल्दी, क्योंकि अभी 1 hour 15 minutes में. ओके, एनसी डेविड सिंह जवान के हो जाए तो बिरयानी मुझे चाहिए। ठीक ठीक, ओके ओके ओके, नाइस, विल गेट योर बिरयानी। तो ओके, चलिए पढ़ लेते हैं जिक्र के रिलेटेड। पर इनको किनको फ्रेंड, अच्छा आपके दोस्तों को बिरयानी चाहिए, ठीक है। तो आप लोगों को ये पोएम समझ आई जो मैंने इससे पहले पढ़ी? थोड़े से मैंने हिंट्स समझा दिए इसमें क्या क्या लिखा हुआ है। डिड यू पीपल गेट इट? और एक मैं पढ़ने जा रहा हूँ, जिक्र। मेरा भी मैसेज देख लो, एक सेकंड में देख रहा हूँ। 1K पर मुझे आपका नाम जानना है। मेरा नाम यही है, जॉन। तो जिक्र। A naked man jumps in the river, hornets swarming above him. The water is the zikr, remembering. There is no reality but God. There is only one God. The hornets are his sexual remembering. This woman, that woman. Or if a woman, this woman, that. The head comes up. They sting. Breathe water. Become river, head to food. Hornets leave you alone then. Even if you are far away from the river, they pay no attention. No one looks for stars when the sun's out. A person blended into God does not appear. He or she is just completely soaked in God's qualities. Do you need a quote from the Quran? All shall be brought into our presence. Join these travelers. The lamp we burn go out, and some quickly. Some last till daybreak. Some are dim, some intense. All felt, all fed with fuel. If a light goes out in one house, that does not affect the next house. This is the story of the animal soul, not the divine soul. The sun shines on every house. When it goes down, all houses get dark. Light is the image of your teacher. Your enemies love the dark. Spider weaves a web over a light. Out of himself or herself makes a veil. Don't try to control a wild horse by grabbing its leg. Take hold the neck. Use a bridle. Be sensible. Then ride. There's a need for self denial. Don't be contemptuous of old obediences. They help. So, आपको कुछ समझ आया इसमें मैंने क्या पढ़ा? चलिए, इसका मैं मतलब व मकसद आपको ज़रा सा समझा दूं कि जब यहाँ पे रूमी कह रहे हैं ना कि हॉर्नेट्स हॉर्नेट्स सिंपली इज द वर्ल्डली प्लेजर। थोड़ा थोड़ा मैं समझाता हूँ। वर्ल्डली प्लेजर जो आपको डिस्ट्रैक्ट करता है फ्रॉम द स्ट्रेट पाथ। What is the straight path? اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين من النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين. This is the straight path. And hornets keep you away from it. Always. They try to do so. ठीक है? What is Rumi saying? When the naked man actually drowns himself, या हम कहेंगे jumps into the water. The water is the zikr. Zikr is what? La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. This is the zikr. जिक्र एक्चुअली यहाँ पे सिर्फ ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह नहीं है, बल्कि द जिक्र इटसेल्फ implicates और implies, हम कहेंगे, means it means actually it means to completely accept the will of the God. Completely, that is जिक्र। जिक्र सिर्फ ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह पढ़ना नहीं होता है। अ, वो तो एक कंडीशनैलिटी है, बट द एक्चुअल मीनिंग ऑफ इट इज टू अबाइड बाय गॉड कंप्लीटली, और उनके पास अपनी विल छोड़ देना, टू सबमिट to the will of God completely. That's what zikr is all about. So when he actually jumps into the water is zikr. और जब obviously जब पानी में होगा तो हॉर्नेट्स उसको टच कर पाएंगे? इट्स नॉट पॉसिबल। और अगर वो अपना सर बाहर निकालेगा तो हॉर्नेट्स आके उसको बाइट करेगी। So what is actually Rumi inculcating here? Why is he saying that आप लोग चैट क्या कर रहे हो? आप लोगों को पोएम में कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं है? आज से कोई किसी को जानता नहीं है। यस, राइट, दैट इज राइट। +1। सो व्हाट इज रूमी इनकलकेटिंग हियर बाय सेइंग दैट आप पानी बन जाओ, आप जिक्र बन जाओ। जिक्र का बनना मतलब होता है, मैं रिपीट कर रहा हूं, टू सबमिट कंप्लीटली योर विल टू गॉड। ठीक है, टू सबमिट कंप्लीटली टू योर विल टू गॉड, दैट इज व्हाट जिक्र इज ऑल अबाउट। बाकी जिक्र का कोई कोई कुछ नहीं है, वो विरद है सिर्फ। अगर आप जबान से दिन रात इसको रिपीट किए जा रहे हो, वो एक विरद है। जिक्र जिक्र कुछ और चीज है। आप उस कलाम में ढल जाते हो, यानी आपके एक्ट्स उस कलाम को प्रैक्टिकली इम्प्लाई करके दिखाते हैं। जैसे मैं आपको एक एग्जांपल दूंगा यहाँ पे। व्हेन हजरत आयशा radiallahu ta'ala anha was asked by a sahabi about the character of prophet. See what zikr is all about the character of prophet. So what did Aisha reply with? She replied, haven't you read the Quran? This is what zikr is all about. What is Rumi saying here? He actually means the hornets or his sexual remembering this woman, that woman, or if a woman, this man, that. The head comes up, they sting. Breathe water, become river, head to foot. ये वही बात है कि become river means become the zikr. Becoming zikr means submitting your will to God. और फिर आपको आप इनविजिबल बन जाते हो। कैसे? देखिए, यहाँ पे आप इनविजिबल कैसे बनोगे? वालेकुम अस्सलाम यक्ता, आई एम फाइन, आप ठीक हो? आप यहाँ पे इनविजिबल कैसे बन जाते हो? हाउ? देखिए, what is in you that attracts the materialistic world? Supposedly you have a fame, you have a name, ठीक है, एंड यू हैव मनी या कुछ और जो भी मटीरियलिज्म आपके पास होगा, दैट अट्रैक्ट्स पीपल टुवर्ड्स यू, as simple as that. The materialistic thing that you are acquiring attracts people towards you. Now when you become the zikr, becoming zikr means completely submitting your will to God. When you completely submit your will to God, you leave everything behind. When you leave everything behind, every attachment of that very materialistic thing detaches. चूंकि उनकी अटैचमेंट आपके साथ किस बिना पे थी, दैट वाज ऑन दिस मटीरियलिस्टिक थिंग। आपके पास कुछ था, जैसे आपके पास धन और दौलत थी, तो आपके पास आपके साथ 10 लोग जुड़े थे। जैसे कल मैं जब मैं स्पेस में हुआ करता था, 40-40, 50-50 बंदे आते थे शायरी सुनने के लिए। मटीरियलिस्टिक बीइंग्स अपने दुख, अपने गमों को रिलेट रिलेट करते हुए 2-3 घंटे तक रह जाते थे। मैं स्पेस में आऊं, मैं छोटी सी एग्जांपल दे रहा हूं, मैं स्पेस में आऊं, चुप रहूं, 2 मिनट के लिए लोग आएंगे और भाग जाएंगे। क्यों? मैंने वो अटैचमेंट, जो मटीरियलिस्टिक अटैचमेंट मेरी थी पोएट्री के साथ, वो छोड़ दी, और वो लोग वहां से रफू चक्कर हो गए। दिस इज व्हाट रूमी इज इनकलकेटिंग। व्हेन यू बिकम द जिक्र, मैंने छोटी सी एग्जांपल दी आप लोगों को, व्हेन यू बिकम द जिक्र, you submit your will to God. When you submit your will to God, you leave every materialistic attachment. When you leave that materialistic attachment, with that, hornets go away. Hornets आपके पास करने क्या आएंगे? जब आपने वो सब छोड़ दिया, जब आप फना हो गए अल्लाह की जात में, देन वो तो आपको दिखेंगे भी नहीं, ना आप उनको दिखेंगे ना वो आपको दिखेंगे। यू विल बिकम इनविजिबल। दैट इज व्हाट इनविजिबल मीन्स। मुझे नहीं लगता कि इस लेवल पे आके आपको कोई समझा सकता है ऐसे, जिस लेवल पे मैंने आके समझा दिया। अदरवाइज ये इस लेवल का नहीं है, ये कुछ और थोड़ा ऊपर जाके, बहुत बहुत ऊपर जाके समझ आ जाता है। मैंने इसको बहुत सिंप्लीफाई करके समझाया आप लोगों को। तो अगेन आई वुड से, इसके बाद रूमी क्या कहते हैं कि हाँ, हाँ, नो वन लुक्स। आप एग्जाम्पल देखिए किस तरह दे देते हैं ये। बिकम रिवर हेड टू फुट। उससे क्या होगा? हॉर्नेट्स लीव यू अलोन, इवन इफ यू आर फार फ्रॉम द रिवर दे पे नो अटेंशन, नो वन लुक्स। देख, अब रिवर यहाँ पे रिवर रिवर की एग्जांपल, यहाँ पे रिवर की एग्जांपल क्यों दी है, समझिएगा रिवर की एग्जांपल क्यों। अब आप रिवर में हो, हॉर्नेट्स आर अवे, आप रिवर से बाहर निकल गए, अब हु इज रिवर? ये भी थोड़ा बहुत इस पे ना अपना जो आपका समझ बूझ है इस पे लगाइएगा। रिवर समझिएगा कि ये रिवर में क्यों जाता है पहले, देन इट इज इट सेल्फ अंडरस्टैंडेबल कि कोई ना कोई सोर्स है जिसकी वजह से हम ये सब छोड़ देते हैं, मटीरियलिस्टिक थिंकिंग एंड मटीरियलिस्टिक एस्पेक्ट ऑफ आवर लाइफ। जब हम वो छोड़ेंगे तो रिवर की वजह से, रिवर क्या है वो समझिएगा आप लोग। फिर रिवर से जब बाहर निकलेगा, क्यों निकलेगा? अब अगर इसको हॉर्नेट्स नहीं आएंगी क्या? क्योंकि रिवर ने इसको कुछ सिखा दिया, रिवर इसके अंदर जज्ब हो गया, ठीक है, वो जिक्र इसके अंदर जज्ब होगी, तो ये कहाँ सीखेगा वो आप थोड़ा बहुत समझिएगा खुद ही। आई डोंट वांट टू गेट इन्वॉल्व इनटू दैट थिंग। इसके बाद, a person blended in God does not disappear. He or she is completely soaked in God's qualities. Do you need a quote from the Quran? All shall be brought into our presence. Join those travelers, the lamp we burn go out some quickly. ये वही है, इहदिना सिरात अल मुस्तकीम। ठीक है, बाकी सब कुछ इसमें सेम है, समझने की ज्यादा जरूरत नहीं, जितना मैंने ये समझा दिया अगर आप ये समझोगे दैट्स मोर देन एनफ। चलिए, लीविंग नाउ, टेकिंग योर लीव। राना अयूब की किताब कल जारी रहेगी और रूमी भी कंटिन्यू चलेगा। विल कंप्लीट दिस बुक एंड दैट बुक एज वेल। टेक केयर। Thank you so much for being here for almost 1 hour and 27 minutes. Ainan, Yakta, not Yakta, Yakta to Abai, Nancy David, Mudassir, Cinnamon, Z. Who else was here? I guess I have taken the name of everyone. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And Basit also.